I've played through Resident Evil 4 on 3 different versions now. I played the HD port of the original game, I played the VR version for the Quest 2, and now I've played the 2023 remake. I'm a big Resident Evil fan. I love the classic games, but RE4 was never my favorite, as it seemed to be for like 90% of people. After playing those originals, 1, 2, 3, Code Veronica, and 0, I came to understand what made the game so great, for me at least. The janky controls, the static camera shots, inventory management and backtracking, the focus being on survival horror and not action, saving your healing items and running past enemies in order to save your precious magnum bullets for the final boss. All of these qualities are what made me fall in love with Resident Evil, so when I first played RE4 it was quite a shock. Suddenly, the game had a massive focus on action. The series had somehow pivoted to a third-person shooter action horror, with emphasis on the action. The map was no longer densely packed with rooms to explore, dozens of locked doors, and puzzles for me to figure out. The backtracking was practically non-existent. Instead, it was long, windy, linear pathways to each chapter's end. Instead of having to cleverly run around enemies, I had to kill every single enemy and keep moving forward. Battling against a single zombie was no longer the frightening experience that it once was. Suddenly, I had to sell treasures and upgrade my weapons, and now my inventory was just a place to store weapons and healing items. Key items and treasures had their own menu, and at the time that I played, I did not like this change at all. I was so used to the old-fashioned process of leaving the safe room, having to leave some of my guns behind so that I could carry some key items I needed for a puzzle. Feeling exposed, helpless, unprotected, I would wander out into the mansion. The limited inventory of the original games was claustrophobic. It added to the spookiness of the game. The sudden and drastic change in vibe for me was confusing. None of the main gameplay qualities that I liked about the first games were still present. Everything felt so different to what I was used to, because it was. This new linear gameplay was Capcom's attempt at modernizing the Resident Evil formula to appeal to broader audiences. Game director Shinji Mikami said, "The Resident Evil remake is actually one of my favorites of the series too, but it didn't sell very well, so I decided to work more action into Resident Evil 4. It would have been a more scary, horror-focused game if the remake had sold well." And I mean, obviously this worked. RE4 is the biggest, most known, most loved entry in the entire franchise. The game sold so incredibly well that it's been released about 11 different times on different consoles. Not to mention how it influenced the gaming industry as a whole. It popularized the over-the-shoulder third-person perspective, which seems ordinary nowadays. It also pioneered QuickTime events in the mainstream gaming sphere. And I mean, I'm not saying if that's a good thing or not, but it goes to show how important this game was. So after all of that, you're probably wondering, why did you hate the game? I didn't hate the game, okay? Don't get me wrong. I just didn't love it the way that I loved all the prior entries, because the game was missing so many of the qualities that made Resident Evil, Resident Evil. It felt like I was playing a spin-off from the main franchise. So it wasn't completely bad, okay? I still enjoyed myself. It was more like mindless fun to me though. Because I went into it hoping for the classic survival horror experience, I was disappointed. But if I had gone into the game without any prior expectations, I might have adored it like everybody else. At the time, I rated the original game a 3.5 out of 5, which is a good rating because it is a good game, and I can't deny that. I just didn't think it was a great Resident Evil game. And of course they had to modernize it somehow. If a company released a game nowadays that was as clunky and backtracky as the original, people would hate it. I feel like it was necessary to mention all of my backstory with this game before I talk about the remake.
Another one! You guys are really starting to become a giant pain in my ass.
I just finished my first playthrough of the 2023 RE4 remake after 16 hours of gameplay. Following the standards set by Capcom in recent years, the remake is obviously phenomenal. They really understand how to modernize the old games without ruining their charm. Some of the features are removed, some new sections are added, new lore is added to flesh out the world, and the side characters feel more important and likable. All of these changes are made to the game without detracting from the original RE4 experience. So obviously the quality of this remake is amazing, just like 2019's Resident Evil 2. Ashley and Luis rock in this game, and Krauser actually has a little bit of backstory instead of just showing up out of nowhere. I would say this game trumps the original and is definitely more playable today. Going into the remake this time, I knew what I was getting into and I didn't have any prior expectations from the original games, so this time I was able to enjoy it for what it was and have a blast. I'm giving this game a strong 4 out of 5, but let's be honest, this is not the last time I'm gonna play Resident Evil 4, so who knows, maybe my rating will go up at some point in the future, but for now this is what I'm giving it. And PS, the VR version of this game is incredible. Simply one of the best experiences that I've ever had gaming. I highly recommend it. If you've gotten to the end of this, then I thank you for listening to me ramble about my experiences with these games. If you want to hear me talk some more about video games in the future, consider subscribing. Thank you.